up, and that has been an issue that we've had to address.
Great. So I appreciate you taking a close look at that, and look forward to this. Well, last time we were planning to meet, you took action before we met. That was great. I hope that can happen again. I want to just summarize the reason, and I can hear the angst in your voice over the Epstein files. The reason people are bothered is because last year you said you'd cut off all contact, but there are 8 incidences of interaction in the files after 2005. In 2009, you wanted to speak with Epstein. You asked for his phone number. In 2011, there was the appointment for drinks. In 2012, you were planning a trip to the private island with your family. That sounds like somebody you know well enough to call up and say, let's get our families together, or let's visit each other. In 2013, the exchange of information about an article relating to intellectual property and gambling, topics that you have an interest in. You both signed up for an investment. It's not clear if you had conversations about that same investment, but you were neighbors. You made the same investment, maybe not. And then in 15, Mr. Paulson, in 2017, Mr. John Paulson wrote to Epstein saying, hey, why don't you contribute to this event? You're a close friend of the Lutnicks, and it's honoring Lutnick. Again, that may not have been you personally involved in that, but I know from many events, when people are raising money, they say, who all do you know that might be contribute if I'm honored? And one supplies a list. And so I guess collectively, it suggests that when you said you cut off all contact in 2005, that was probably not a full and complete accounting. And again, no suggestion of wrongdoing on your part, in propriety, if you will. But I do think kind of restating that and clarifying to people that you understand that your statement you made last year might not have accurately portrayed. And then there was also the communication regarding the museum across the street being put up, and that action needed to be taken, and what should we do. So that's 8 different instances. Just encourage you to be completely frank and open with everyone, correct the record as needed, and again, no wrongdoing on your part. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Mr. Secretary. It is nice to see you here today. I look forward to being able to visit with you about some of the programs in the Commerce Department, so thank you for being here. In December, I wrote to NTIA with over a dozen of my Senate colleagues, including Chairman Moran. And this letter urged the agency to ensure that states would be allowed to retain and to maximize their BEAD funding allocation in compliance with the bipartisan infrastructure law, which I supported. I know Chairman Moran has also touched on this in his questions with you this morning, but first and foremost, do you agree that states should be able to retain those broadband infrastructure dollars as is consistent with the law?
We will hew to the law, for sure. I think the best use of those funds, I think we need to talk about and try to come up with the best idea. But we have saved the American taxpayers $21 billion, and I think it behooves us to work hard to make sure the next use of those funds are the best they can be for the American taxpayer.
And I agree that you need to follow the law, but with the bipartisan infrastructure law, I personally think it was laid out pretty clearly on how those funds need to be maximized, and I happen to think that states are the places that we experiment. I'm a strong supporter of federalism, and every state is different, to be able to use those funds in a way that address the differences in our state. So I look forward to being able to visit with you more about that and make a good case to you about it, sir. So thank you. In December, I also wrote a separate letter to NTIA, and I encourage the agency to allow precision agriculture connectivity to be an eligible use of the BEAD non-deployment dollars. Optimizing last mile deployments with last acre connections is critical for agricultural states like Nebraska. This eligibility would leverage the deployment plans that NTIA has already approved, enhancing networks and driving economic development throughout rural America. And these are goals that the infrastructure law explicitly outlined. So will you work with me to ensure that precision agriculture considerations are addressed within eligible uses for the remaining BEAD funds?
I look forward to talking with you and addressing precision agriculture. It sounds something worthwhile, and we will spend time together learning it and figuring out the best way to do things.
Good. Wonderful. I'd love to have you host you in Nebraska with the university to be able to see all the really cool stuff that technology can do with precision agriculture and how that's going to not just benefit ag producers and states, states like mine, but how it's going to be able to manage our resources, whether it's water or land, and feed the world. So let me host you in Nebraska.
Sounds like fun.
Yay. Okay. And Mr. Secretary, after the benefit of the bargain rounds, there's estimated to be over $20 billion in uncommitted BEAD funding funds that are remaining. And as you imagine, for senators like me who strongly supported the infrastructure law, we believe that funding needs to be put to best use, again, by staying in states to close that divide. I know you've talked about how NTIA has a public listening session tomorrow to inform its determinations. But would you please discuss some of the initial proposals that the department is considering at this time for using those non-deployment funds?
Sure. The department has received ideas, for example, to invest in poles in locations that don't have sufficient poles to get access directly to communities. That would be an example. Another example is to invest in public safety so that the police, the firemen, the local community can do a much better job communicating with each other in times of crisis. So that would be another example of how you could do better investment in the communication infrastructure. So those are two examples that just come to mind quickly. But tomorrow we will get a broad group of examples, and I think we'll be much better served just talking to you and yourselves and your staff. If they'd like to talk to us, we'd be glad to learn their ideas.
Great. I think telehealth is a wonderful investment to be able to help communities across the board. Cybersecurity, obviously you're very well aware of the issues that businesses, communities, government faces with regard to being hacked, interfered with on our systems. So cybersecurity, I think, is another great area to be able to look at as well. So I look forward to having conversations with you, and I appreciate your work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hello, Secretary Lutnick. I have a couple questions related to the BEAD program, but I have another question, a couple that I'd like to ask you about what I think is probably one of your principal responsibilities as Secretary of Commerce, and that's the conducting of the U.S. Census. I'm a ranking member of Homeland Security and Government Affairs. We oversee that. And as you know, it's a monumental undertaking that requires an awful lot of upfront effort. And last week, some information came to my attention I'm concerned about, is that the Census Bureau announced that it's going to cancel 4 of the 6 sites for the 2026 census test, which was supposed to start next month. Canceling these tests and firing the people in your department who are already hired, they're already there, hired to complete it, with no advance notice, I think first off, is wasteful. At best, and worst, it seems as if there could be an effort to sabotage this effort, which I hope is not the case. I believe that we can't have an accurate 2030 census. It's one of the largest, most complicated tasks in our federal government without proper preparation. We've seen that over many, many years. This is a template that we've had to follow. We need an accurate count of everyone who lives in America to ensure that communities and families receive the funding that they need for schools, for health care, for first responders, infrastructure, and so much more. And fully carrying out these tests is a necessary part of making sure that we're able to actually pull that off. So given these facts, I just need a yes or no answer. Will you commit to undoing the cancellations of these 4 testing sites and commit to completing a complete census test, which is an essential step in being able to do the full-blown version a few years from now?
I appreciate the question, and I agree with you. The test is vital and important, but I'd like you to understand we are, for the first time ever, going to use the post office. The United States Post Office is going to execute the 2026 test, and the survey we're going to use is the American Community Survey. So we are going to go out with a more sophisticated census, and we're going to use we've made a deal with the post office, so we're going to pay the post office to execute that. But you can imagine the efficiency of already having hundreds of thousands of people who already work for the federal government, who already have cars, who already pay for the gas, and they already know where everybody lives. So this is one of my big moves for efficiency. We are testing 2026 to see, can the post office do it? Because our objective is, I think the post office can do the census in 2030, do a better job because they go to 169 million homes every day. They should be able to do the census brilliantly and for far more efficiently. And the test, as you correctly pointed out, is coming very, very shortly in 2026. So I think, you know, I'm happy to talk to you about it and go through it with you together so you can best understand what our plan is.
I appreciate that, because obviously this is a big change, and if it doesn't go well, that has catastrophic impact. So I would hope you would also commit, as you're doing this and moving forward, is that you will make all the planning results of the 26 census test available to the public and to Congress, so we can fully evaluate this together and that we can perform our oversight function. Would that be something you'd be willing to agree to today? Fully transparent with the test.
I'll certainly take that under advisement, but it makes perfect sense for us to talk about it and make sure this is a test of a new idea. Let's see how it goes, but I'd be happy to meet with you and your staff and go through it because that makes sense.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And if it's not going well, it's hard to, time is a wasted. So it's important for us to really have a good sense of what's going to be going on.
Well, that's why it's vital, sorry, but that's why it's vital to do the test in 2026 for the 2030 census, right? That's why this test is vital.
And it's also vital that we assess it fully to understand it's actually working, so we can make a course correction if necessary. Also on the topic of the census, it's been reported that your department plans to add a question to the census test asking people their citizenship status. The Supreme Court has already overturned past efforts to include a citizenship question on the census, and it's because the Constitution, it's a great document, the U.S. Constitution, requires the Census Bureau count, quote, the whole number of persons in each state, end of quote, regardless of citizenship status. The Census Bureau's own research, your own Census Bureau's own research has shown that asking immigrant questions on the census will make it less accurate by making people, including citizens, less likely to participate. And that will be especially true now given the racial profiling, abuse of power, the violence that Americans are witnessing on the streets of America right now. And so given the hard evidence that asking immigration-related questions actually sabotages the success of the census, and the constitutional questions related to that as well, yes or no, will you commit to leaving a citizenship question off of the questionnaire? Will you take that off?
It's Senator, it's a longer answer. I don't know how you'd like me to play it. It's not a yes or no, sorry.
Without objection, Mr. Chairman, you could answer the question. It is an important one.
Yes, go ahead.
You correctly point out that citizenship is not in the Constitution for the apportionment right? The most important thing, which is the 435 seats and the 435 electoral votes, are not predicated on citizenship. That is not it's not a necessary factor to determine apportionment. Whether what the questionnaire is, I don't know, and we've not decided. But I agree with you, citizenship is not in the Constitution for apportionment.
But just to the question, the other part is that your own department has evidence to show that it has a chilling effect on people even participating in the census, including citizens. And if they're not participating, then that is going to have an impact on their local community's ability to access public health benefits, education benefits, and a long list, which I know you're very well of. It is very troubling, and it's based on objective studies done by the Census Bureau. Having that on that test is going to undercount citizens based on research that is done. Doesn't that trouble you?
I'm not familiar with that being true, but I will look into it.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Reed.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Secretary, you've referred and referenced that dozens of states have submitted complete plans for deployment dollars under BEARD and signed final agreements. Rhode Island, my state, has done that. They signed their final agreement nearly 2 months ago, but they have not got any funding, and they have no indications of what lies ahead. Can you clarify the situation? What's the holdup?
If your state has signed the agreement, they should be able to draw funds. There is nothing. Once we send you the document, if you sign it, you can draw funds from the grant process. There should be nothing in the way. And I'm happy as I leave here to go find out how I can help you fix that. Because if you've signed that, there should be nothing in your way to receive the grant proceeds.
And if you want a person to deliver it, Newport's a nice place to deliver it.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. Until you became secretary, you led the investment bank, Cantor Fitzgerald, and Cantor Fitzgerald is still maintaining significant business ties with Tether, a stablecoin issuer domiciled in El Salvador. And under the Genius Act, which was enacted last year, Tether is permitted to freely offer and sell its stablecoin token in the United States without needing a license from U.S. regulators and without needing to meet any U.S. anti-money laundering and sanctions compliant requirements or obtain an audit. All it needs to do is demonstrate that El Salvador's stablecoin regulations are similar to the United States. And I think this is a huge risk because Tether has been identified as helping to fund Hamas, North Korean WMD proliferation, ransomware attacks, Russian arms deals, et cetera. Now, you said in your confirmation hearing, quote, "I believe U.S. dollar-backed stablecoins should be fully audited," close quote. Does this include Tether? And if so, why has Tether not been audited?
Two things for you. I am, of course, completely divested from all things business. I am just worried about the United States of America. My understanding is that Tether has launched a U.S. fully approved under the Genius Act stablecoin. So I think the only Tether stablecoin in America will be the fully approved under the Genius Act stablecoin. And generally speaking, I absolutely agree with you. Tether should be audited. I don't have anything to do with it, but I agree with you that Tether should be audited.
Well, we both agree, and so I think it's an indication perhaps that the Genius Act has to be sharpened up a bit because there is no legal requirement for them to be audited, and they can still operate freely in the United States. But that's a topic probably for another hearing. Let me move on to the value of the dollar, Mr. Secretary. It's hit a 4-year low. In fact, it's fallen 10% since the administration took office. And general question, how do we maintain our economic prominence in the world with a weakening dollar? I know some people will point out and say, well, that's good in some respects because it brings investment to the United States, jobs. But in addition to a weakening dollar, we've seen that manufacturing jobs are falling too. So what is your response to these issues about the falling dollar?
The dollar over many years has been manipulated higher in order to keep the U.S. economy from exporting to the rest of the world, right? That's the idea. It's more expensive for everyone else in the world to buy our products, and it's cheaper for us to buy theirs. When the Trump administration and the president called out this fact that we were running $1.2 trillion trade deficits. I mean, the rest of the world was selling us stuff and using our dollars to buy our country from beneath us, right? Remember, in 1985, we owned more of the rest of the world than they owned of us. And now the rest of the world owns 26 trillion more of us than we own of them. So the idea is the dollar where it is now is just more natural. We are exporting more, and that's why our GDP has grown so much, right? We had 4.4% GDP growth in the third quarter. I think personally, my opinion is I think the fourth quarter will be over 5%, and I think we reasonably could get over 6% in the first quarter because our exports are growing, the weaker dollar. Our imports have shrunk because of tariffs, and that's GDP growth.
Well, you say that our economy has been sort of stepping back from foreign investment, purchasing, et cetera, but the president touts every time he meets with a foreign leader how much money they're going to invest, i.e. buy American property, buy American facilities, et cetera. Is there a contradiction?
Building in America rather than us buying their products that they build overseas. When you build a product overseas, you're employing these foreign countries' people. When you build in America, you have to employ Americans to build the product. You build in America and you employ Americans to build your product is something that the president is pushing for. Stop importing. Let's build manufacturing. In America, you're going to see enormous manufacturing job growth coming over the course of 2026, in my opinion.
I haven't seen it yet, but I hope you're right. May I ask one more question, Mr. Chairman? Thank you. The Trump administration has approved sale of NVIDIA H200 chips to China. I can tell you, I just came from the Armed Services Committee. I've served on that committee for 30-plus years. Talking to uniformed military officers, they are quite concerned. In fact, they believe this is a very dangerous situation of giving China literally a leg up in technology. And Congress is requiring NVIDIA to self-certify that the H200 chips sold to China are not for military or intelligence end use. Well, how will you, at the Department of Commerce, track the final end use of these chips to ensure that they're not used for military or intelligence uses, and how will you enforce these conditions?
The license terms are very detailed. They've been worked out together with the State Department, and those terms NVIDIA must live with and must hew to.
Do you believe the Chinese will live with them? Did you trust the Chinese to follow up and to be the contract that they've executed with NVIDIA?
I'll leave that opinion to the President of the United States.
Well, I think it's a tragic, difficult, and wrong decision. Because, again, not only will the Chinese exploit, as they've demonstrated for the last several decades, any type of intellectual property they get their hands on, but I think also this might apply to the proposed sales to the United Arab Emirates, because it's quite easy for them to include it in a device, sell the device to China, have the Chinese take apart the device and get the chip, and they could say, oh, we didn't sell the chips to China. I think you've got a serious problem here, and without oversight by the Department of Commerce, real oversight, these chips will be misused to the detriment of our military forces. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Reid. Mr. Secretary, I'm going to ask a question or two, and so is Senator Van Hollen, and then we'll be done. You have used the phrase allowed by law sufficiently a number of times that it caused me to look to see what the law says when talking about how the unspent money will be spent. And there is a long list of items under use of funds. The last one is number 6. Any use determined necessary by the Assistant Secretary to facilitate the goals of the program. Is that what you refer to when you say anything allowed by law? Is that discretion?
I think the idea is to meet with the constituencies, yourselves, and try to come up with the smartest use of the funds. Make sure it stays within the statute, of course. But what is the smartest use? We have proven, I think, to this committee that we are good stewards of the American taxpayer's dollar, and we will continue to do that. So we will work together to come up with the best ideas. I suggested a few that had just come to us, but I think we will work it out in a way that is smart.
Do you have any doubt but what there'll still be significant portions of the country and consumers that when BEAD is fully implemented, absent the, quote, unspent funds, there'll still be plenty of opportunities to provide broadband to the American consumer? Or do you think that BEAD, with the money that's been made available, will meet the needs of the country for broadband services?
My understanding is each state gave us the complete list, the complete total of those who needed to be served, and we are serving universal broadband access. So this is to cover every single person as of the date we did it. That is the objective, and that is what I think we are going to achieve. We are going to give broadband internet connectivity to every single person that every state said was in need. We will deliver.
And that does not necessitate the use of the unspent funds to reach that goal?
It does not, and each of the broadband states, the broadband offices of the states agrees.
So in my opening statement, I talked about the amount of money allocated to Kansas originally, and then with the change in the direction of the policy, that it was much less was demanded. So that less money presumably meets the goal of providing everything that Kansas needs. It just took less money to do it?
Correct, because we used competition. Biden administration had selected one way to do it, and there was very little competition and a huge amount of red tape. If you bring competition in between fiber, fixed wireless, and satellite, you get much better economics, as we all know. So we got much better economics for solving the same performance standards and covering every single person. This is universal coverage at a much better deal.
I think my final question, then I'll turn to Senator Van Hollen. The BEAD program or any federal broadband deployment program, those resources, those grant dollars are taxable to the provider that receives the funds. And under current law, when a broadband deployment, a provider is initiating the plan to rely upon federal funds, that provider has to account for 21% of that award being paid back in federal taxes. And I introduced, with a number of my colleagues, the Broadband Grant Tax Treatment Act, which excludes certain grants, including BEAD, from those dollars being taxable. I think you've testified or indicated before you support that legislation. I'm back at the making the effort to see we get it passed, and I want to get your reaction and see if my understanding is that you're supportive of eliminating the tax on the proceeds of grants to those providers. You still support that position if you previously did.
I think that kind of opinion is best served with yourselves, right? Whether you choose on an appropriation that you've given, we've executed it. Whether you think we should tax it or not, I'll leave to your committee. I think it is best served by.
Well, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it to another committee than this one, at least initially. But it does diminish the dollars that are available, and the interest in participating